Hey Danny, how are you?
I am a-okay today. I'm a-okay. I got a little rest last night,
Ooh.
breakfast, like these little things they just really start to matter way more than they should.
I love that for you. You got the rest and the breakfast for the both of us because I have had neither. So I'm going to just tap into yours.
Oh, well, let's just jump right on in so that we can hopefully get you some breakfast and
Want some
and
rest.
some and some rest. So, the quote of the week is to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment.
Yeah.
And that is by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I love that quote. I don't know if I think it's the greatest accomplishment. However, I do think I'm just going to disagree with the great Ralph Waldo Emerson. I sure am. Um, but I do think that it is really important. Like if you can tap into, and I think that those quotes that talk about being yourself they should insert it with being the best version of yourself,
Yes.
because the version that we are sometimes isn't the version that we should strive to stay at.
Mhm.
So I would like to vote to replace all things about being yourself with being the highest version, the most evolved version, the best version, the happiest version of yourself, because we do need to sometimes be honest with where we are, not necessarily being the best place for us.
Mm. I really, really like that. Primarily because it's really easy to say, well, oh, this is just who I am, and that's just what it is. And it's like,
Right.
and you can also be better. You can be
And you
better.
suck. And you suck, right? Like that's that's a thing. I always say that. I'm just like, but what if who you are sucks? You know? Sometimes, sometimes who you are right now. But it's always with the caveat that there is potential and space and room and opportunity to be better and to be more.
Absolutely.
It's not a sentencing, it's an opportunity for growth.
Absolutely. I am a firm believer that as long as you are still alive, you are still breathing, you can change, you can right this ship, you can turn around. You do not have to hit the iceberg. You can see it and say, if I continue in this way, there is an iceberg called, I don't know, getting fired, getting dumped,
Losing
losing your money.
everything.
Yeah, losing your money, losing everything, your friends deciding that they can no longer maintain closeness with you. Those are all icebergs. And you can decide that you're not going to hit them by saying, who I once was does not work. I used to be a liar. I used to be a person who, did not manage money well. I used to be a mean mommy. Like whatever your things are that you feel you used to be. I used to not manage time well. Whatever those things are, name them, right?
Yeah.
Once you name them, then you're able to, okay, this is who I used to be. This is who I'm going to decide I will be now. It simply takes making a decision. And I know it can seem as though, oh, well, that's easier said than done. You're right. It is easier said than done, which is why it takes a commitment to now who you're going to be. Robert Brace said it really, really well. We make commitments to everything else. Why not make a commitment to becoming your greatest self, the best version of who you are? So, yeah, love that quote. Love it, love it, love it. And now on to the Dating Well AF tip of the week. Now, this one is one that I have been working on myself for such a long time, but it's finding joy and acceptance in exactly who you are. I know that's a tough one, especially if you've been having trouble with dating, or guys ghost you a lot, or you're not meeting people who you actually like. Finding joy in who you are and accepting who that person is can be quite challenging because you're like, wait, clearly something isn't working. And I want you to remember this: there is a butter for every bread. You simply have to find your tribe. That's it. That's it. Find your tribe. And while you are finding your tribe, so that you keep your energy up, so that you're going out into the world with the best intentions, you're going to make sure you do these things. First, identify and write down 10 things that you have wanted to try but you just never got around to. I mean, all the things, whether it's a solo trip or a massage or trying a new restaurant or a new recipe. Write down 10 things. They could be big, small, medium, it doesn't matter. They are specific to you. And then I want you once a week or even once every other week for the next 2 months to try those things. Whether it's going out to take yourself on a date, whatever it is, I want you to start trying those things so that you can start tapping into the joy of what it feels like to connect with a partner that you like, so that you can go out and start to explore the pieces and parts of yourself that you only discover while you're in motion or in action. I want you to try it. And then I want y'all to let us know how it goes for you. Okay? We want to hear it.
Yes, and to round it out, we have the Black women were just dominating at the Emmys.
I
Like, I am just
know.
so happy. We have Quinta Brunson, who's the first Black woman to win Best Comedic Actress for Abbott Elementary in 4 decades. The first Black woman was Isabel Sanford for The Jeffersons in 1981. Then we have Niecy Nash winning for Best Supporting Actress for her role in the the movie about Jeffrey Dahmer. What was that? The show
Mm.
about Jeffrey? Remember,
Yeah,
she
on
was the woman
Netflix.
on Netflix. Yeah, and she was like the woman who was like seeing everything and nobody believed her. She gave an incredible speech, and my favorite part of her speech was thanking her damn self. Okay, because she said that she knows the hard work and everything that she put into it, and all
Yeah.
the no's and all the rejection,
And
and
the
there is nothing
sacrifices.
wrong. Yeah, with just thanking yourself and patting yourself on the back because of all the things that you know you had to go through, because it's easy for people to judge you and look at you and be like, "Oh, she must have did this to get that." Or, "Oh, she must think she's all that." But they don't see the hard work and the tears and the frustration and the depression that comes into really trying to chase your dream. We have Ao, and I hope I'm saying her name right, so forgive me if I'm not, but Ao Idaberry. She's the actress from the comedic series The Bear, which I recently started watching and I love it. She won for Best Supporting Actress. So, I mean, it was so nice to see Black women winning in comedy, especially
Yes.
because for what I mean, I've never met a Black woman who's not kind of funny. So it's so nice to see us winning in those spaces as opposed to the drama and the crying and the anger and like those kind of like heavier roles. It's
Yeah.
nice to see us, and Quinta Brunson is a comedic writer. Like, this is like
Yeah.
she's the boss of Abbott Elementary. So
Yeah.
it's nice to see us winning in comedic spaces and winning for artistry and winning for beautiful things. I feel like in the past when women have won some of these awards, especially Black women, it's for playing such heavy roles, whether it's slaves or being overly sexual. It's nice to see this.
Yeah.
This is another way to win, and that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually have met some Black women who are not funny. No disrespect, y'all.
Really? I feel like most Black women I know, once you get to know them, like, y'all gonna have a little kiki. No, that's my
I've
experience.
met some dull ones, but that's okay. Listen, everybody gets to be who they are. That's what this is all about. Okay. And in this episode, we are,
Not Black women are funny.
I've met some that
I
are,
disagree with that. I met some. What does Samaya call them again? I always forget, but it's the best.
she calls dull people dud muffins. Like, you're just a
Dud
dud muffin.
muffin. Like, what is a better name for a dull person than a dud muffin? Like, it sounds exactly like what you mean. Like, she's a dud muffin, and even if you don't know what that is, you're like, oh, I know what that is.
Yeah, like there's nothing, you're just there. You just exist. I mean, and
Yeah.
again, there's nothing wrong with you just existing. Just like in this conversation, we are about to tap into how to figure out and get to know exactly who you are, learn how your brain works. Y'all are going to enjoy this. I got my whole life. My whole life. Listen, I already know. I'm going to learn so much about myself, and it's going to be such a great episode. So tap on in. We will see you over there. Hey, y'all. So today's conversation is one that I am super excited to have, not only because we have never had this particular conversation on the podcast, and also I'm excited because I have ADHD. it has proven to be quite a challenge for me. And just learning more information about not only how to manage it, how to honor what my needs are, and also, too, how to help those who are listening who also may, I don't want to say suffer because I'm not suffering, but also are finding different ways in which they need to work through, work with, and figure out how to work with their brain instead of against it. So we are super excited to have Jessica McCabe. She is the creator, host, and author of How to ADHD. How are you doing?
I'm excited to be here. Thank you. I'm tired. I've
Yes.
done a lot of podcasts today, but I'm excited about this one.
Yes,
Ooh.
welcome. Welcome to Trigger the Air. We're so happy to have you. I am very interested in this conversation. Alicia was really like championing this conversation because I was just like, I don't have ADHD and I don't know too much about it. So I'm hoping that we can inform those of us who don't have ADHD and then also help inform those of us who are kind of managing it and learning how to manage it a lot better. But before we get into that part of the conversation, something we ask all of our guests before we jump in is of all the things that you do, all the accolades, all the titles, all the accomplishments, who do you say that you are?
Honestly, it depends on the day.
Okay,
It
well,
really,
today,
really
what
does.
do you say today?
Today I'm still riding the high. This book actually became a New York Times bestseller, and
Oh,
thank you. I
congratulations!
am so excited. I was trying so hard to make that happen, but it's not something you have complete control over. So I was super excited
Yeah.
that it happened. And so my partner's been teasing me for a while. We went out to dinner to celebrate, and he goes, "Yeah, you got chips and guacamole, but these aren't ordinary chips and guacamole. These are the chips and guacamole of New York Times best-selling author Jessica McCabe."
Yes.
And then it expanded because we got Publishers Weekly, we got on their bestseller list, and USA
Oh,
Today. So now it's just gotten ridiculous to where like I'm now today just for fun because my boyfriend's teasing me about this. I am now USA Today, Publishers Weekly, and New York Times bestselling author Jessica McCabe, first of her name. Like it's the title has gotten a bit ridiculous, but I'm just gonna enjoy it because I've never accomplished something
yes.
like this before. So I'm just kind of leaning into it.
Yes.
Yes.
This is huge.
Yes.
Congratulations.
That's
Thank you.
amazing.
Oh, I just got chills. I'm really excited for you because when I was listening to your story, you were saying that you had all of this potential, but that you weren't able to finish college and you were struggling and there were challenges and you got married and you were divorced in the first year and there were just all these things. So now, and I love too the piece that you allowed yourself to understand that who I am right now might not be who I am a month from now or 6 months from now, and that is okay to change. I get to be someone else. Oh, I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And yeah, it was really huge. I did like went through most of my life hearing about how I had so much potential and I just needed to try harder to reach it and to achieve something like this where I not only wrote a book but it was a bestseller. I'm like, okay, nobody can be like, "Well, you had the potential to do better." Like what is better? Like that's good. Like I just objectively I did good and it feels
Yes.
really good to have achieved something like that when it was such a struggle my entire life.
Oh, this is amazing. Congratulations again. I'm sorry. I'm just allowing us to sit in this. No, I'm not sorry, actually. I'm allowing us to sit in this, to bask with you in such a huge accomplishment because it really is incredible, especially because, and I know you know so much about the subject, but for those who don't, and I am one who doesn't as well, even though I have been working through it my entire life. But what do you think are some of the things, or maybe some of the causes that have been linked to ADHD? I know I was doing my own research, but I would love to hear it from you because you clearly know a lot more about it than we do.
Yeah. So what we know so far is that there are polygenetic factors. It's not one gene that makes it so that somebody pops out and has ADHD. There's many genes that can get expressed and contribute to ADHD. It's highly genetic. It tends to run in families. In fact, that's how I was diagnosed. Was my cousin, who was a boy, fit the stereotypical like little white boy bouncing off the walls, getting into trouble, kind of like what you imagine when you think of a
Yeah.
kid with ADHD. Like he very much fit that stereotype. So he
Mhm.
was taken to the doctor by his mom and said, who said, hey, he struggles with a lot of the same things that I struggled with when I was in school, and I don't want him to have the outcome that I had. And so the doctor handed both of them an evaluation, and they both left with a diagnosis and a prescription. And at that point, my mom looked at me and said, you're a lot like your aunt who had just got diagnosed. And so I ended up going to get the diagnosis as well at that point. And at this point, I've forgotten the question. What was the question?
No, it was oh shoot. See, listen,
oh, like what causes it, right?
What are things that are linked or so far, whatever they know?
So we know it's highly, highly genetic. It's one of the most genetic conditions that you can have, and it tends to be, it tends to present in childhood. It's not always diagnosed. It's not always caught in childhood. For some girls and women, it tends to be a little bit like maybe subclinical. Maybe they don't qualify for all the criteria, but then they go through puberty, hormones change, and that pushes them above that clinical presentation. And so they can sometimes be diagnosed later. Sometimes people are not diagnosed until they're adults, but generally speaking, it did show up in childhood because it is such a genetic condition.
That's really, really interesting. Primarily because a lot of times people say, oh, well, I have ADD, not ADHD, thinking like, oh, ADD is the lesser of the two evils. And I used to think the same thing. But is there a difference, just for our listeners who are still trying to understand, especially for those who are supporting folks who have, ADD or ADHD? I think they no longer call it ADD. Just a little bit of background on that.
Yeah. So some people still refer to it as ADD because it's kind of shorthand for what we now call ADHD, the primarily inattentive presentation. I was originally diagnosed with ADD. I had the diagnosis for 20 years before I started learning about what that really meant. And when I went to go learn about it, I found out, it's not called ADD anymore. It's actually called ADHD, which was really weird to me because I was like, but I'm not hyperactive. It turns out I am. I just had a misunderstanding of what that hyperactivity looks like. But there's 3 presentations now of ADHD. It's the primarily inattentive presentation, which is what a lot of people think of when they think of ADD. Then there's the primarily hyperactive impulsive presentation, which is what a lot of people think of when they think of like Bart Simpson, the kid bouncing off the walls, getting into trouble. And then there's combined type, which is a combination of both of them. It means you'd qualify for both diagnoses. And so I have ADHD combined type. But it is possible to have just the inattentive presentation or just the hyperactive impulsive presentation. But even then, the reason they call it presentations is they've realized like they're not separate conditions. They're not even different types. It's how it's showing up. It's what it looks like. It's what the symptoms are. And those symptoms, that presentation can actually change over time.
Okay.
I mean, and it is something that affects about 5 to 8% of the global population. So it's not just completely, I mean, 5 to 8% sounds like a small amount, but that's actually a lot of people.
Like lot of people.
That's a lot of people. Yeah. So just to put that into perspective, but what are some ways that we can work with our brain versus against against the diagnosis or against the way that it presents to overcome the challenges that do come up, in this type of, with people with this kind of diagnosis? Like, how can they better regulate their attention and manage their behavior? Like, how do you kind of work with it as opposed to fighting it? Because sometimes when you get a diagnosis like that, it's easy to feel like something's wrong with you.
Yeah. And you need to fix yourself. You need to fix your brain. You need to, you need to essentially, for a lot of people with ADHD, it's almost like the goal is to not have ADHD anymore. Like, oh, it's okay to have ADHD, but like, try not to like do all these things and like try to be more neurotypical. And a lot of the interventions are in service of getting us to appear more neurotypical. Like, you're weird, you're struggling with these things. Let's get you over here, using a calendar regularly and making your to-do list and like doing all these very neurotypical things, like managing your time better and all these things. And I'm not saying there's not value in that because we do live in a world that expects people to be on time, right? But what I learned is like, you can use all the self-help books in the world and all the strategies in the world. You're not going to be neurotypical. You're going to be a really shitty version of neurotypical, maybe like at best, right? Like at best, you're going to do enough that you can like pass as neurotypical, but that should not be the goal because we do have brains with different operating systems, different strengths, different traits. And if we lean into the strengths and we lean into how our brains naturally work and work with our brains, it can be a lot more effective. We can accomplish really amazing things that maybe a neurotypical person wouldn't, because it's not their strong suit. So I think it's like a situation where you want to get good enough at the things that you need to be good at, but not at the expense of doing the things that are really more natural to your brain and the way your brain more naturally works. And so I do talk about in the book, like, what working with your brain, not against it, looks like for me. So it's focusing on what does work for me rather than what should. There's so many times that I got so much advice about, like, well, you should do it like this, or you should just do this, or and I try and I can't, right? Because it's not how my brain naturally works. You kind of have to lean into your brain's natural tendencies and pay attention to, does this strategy work for me? And if not, maybe I don't need to fit myself to the strategy. Maybe I need to find a strategy that fits me. So building a toolbox of strategies that I can use for tasks that I struggle with, because if I don't do that for myself, neurotypical people are going to keep handing me stuff and be like, you just use this, try this. And I'll be like, this one doesn't fit though. Like, this doesn't work for me. But if I don't have like my own tools, what am I supposed to do? I'm going to have to use the wonky hammer, right? Like, I'm going to have to use the thing that isn't a good fit for me because I don't have my own tools. So I try to show up with my own tools, my own toolbox, and doing my most challenging work at times when my brain works best. So this is very, very common with ADHD, that there are times where we can really focus and do an amazing job and like our brains are engaged. And then there's other times where it's like pulling teeth or like trying to nail Jello to the wall to try and do it. And so I try to pay attention to like when in the day does my brain work best, but also like under what conditions, what does my brain need to be able to do its best work?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially
a lot of awareness is necessary.
It's a lot of self-awareness. Yeah. Because if you don't understand how your brain works, the world will tell you how it works and they will be wrong because most of the world does not have ADHD, right? And most self-help books are not written for people with ADHD. And I read so many self-help books and took so many courses on organization and productivity and stuff like that. And none of it worked for me because it was tailored to the majority of the population, and the majority of the population does not have ADHD.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because I remember when I was researching some of your background, I think I was listening to your TED Talk, which congratulations on that too. It was really like, I was captivated. I was texting Danny. I was like, oh my God, I feel so seen. Especially with it, like I have mountains of to-do lists, like my to-do lists are something serious. I don't function without them. I have to know, what am I supposed to do? When am I supposed to do it? Because if not, I get lost. I don't mean to get lost, but it's a thing. Like I have to make sure that I'm honoring, like you were saying, how my brain works. But you spoke about when people who have ADHD, when they're passionate about something, how it makes it easier for them to lock in to get it done. Could you explain a bit more about that piece? Because I just found that to be so incredibly interesting, because that's me. Ask Danny, when I'm really like, oh no, I found something I love, like a little crazy person. And I know that's not the politically correct term, but I'm talking about myself, so no one is getting offended. But I literally will zero in, lock in, and cannot stop until it's done because I'm so excited about it or passionate about it. I would love to hear like any type of like, how can folks tap into that piece when you're trying to figure out, because we just spoke, having self-awareness is pivotal. So figuring out like what you like or what you're passionate about or what you want can help to accomplish things when you are not, neurotypical. I know. We interrupted at the best part, but hear me out.
Dating should not be this hard. Let's be honest. We've all said it at least once that the dating pool has pee in it.
It has to. After dozens of dates, too many failed relationships, engagements, marriages, and even a divorce, we decided it was crucial that we find ways to be better at attracting the partners that we desire. So we did just that, and we created the Dating Well AF course.
It's specifically designed to show women how to date with intention and in alignment with their desired type of lifestyle and experience. The 5-module crash course developed by certified coaches Alicia and Danny provides practical tools to date well and live even better.
So I want you to register now for lifetime access to the Dating Well AF course at datingwellaf.com. You will tap all the way in to learn how to identify those self-sabotaging behaviors, discover new ways to date intentionally, and to nurture that healthy love.
Remember, one of the most important life decisions you will ever make is who you decide to make your partner. Make the choice well and visit datingwellaf.com.
Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. There's it's motivation. You're talking about motivation. You're talking about focus. You're talking about engagement. You're talking about a bunch of different things. So first of all, what motivates an ADHD brain is different from what motivates a neurotypical brain. Neurotypicals are generally motivated by things that are important or good for my career, or this will make my mother proud, right? Like it's just this long-term, like, this is a good path for me to be on, and this is important, right? Whereas ADHD brains tend to be chronically under aroused. We lack stimulation. And so we're more motivated by things that are urgent or new or novel, like the new shiny, things that are of personal interest, things that are the right level of challenging. So this is a really interesting thing. Sometimes we can't focus on something because it's boring, because it's actually too easy for us. So, it can be like, well, how come you can't do this simple task, but you can, go start a whole company and do this whole other thing? Well, because that's interesting and it's challenging and it's new and it's novel and all of these things, right? It might not be the more important thing. Like, it might be more important to, submit your college applications than to rearrange your bedroom. But, we get engaged by what our brains are engaged by, and it tends to be what our brains find stimulating because of there's differences in the reward system in the ADHD brain. So there's that. But then what you asked is, like, how do we take advantage of that? And so I wrote a chapter called How to Hyperfocus, because you're also talking about attention regulation. Our brains can't choose to focus on what we're supposed to focus on. It's not an attention deficit. That's a really weird name for it, actually, because we don't lack attention. It's almost like we have too much attention. It's either bouncing all over the place, or we get sucked in so deeply that we almost can't pull ourselves away. So that's called hyperfocus. And it's a really, really deep state of flow. And sometimes we end up hyperfocusing on something and we really know that we should move on to something else, but like we can't. It's just captured us, and it's kind of like something casts a spell on you, and now that's just what you're doing that day. And that can be a double-edged sword, right? And so one of the things I talk about in that chapter is make space for hyperfocus, because we can get so much done and we can be so effective when our brains are engaged like that. But also install some guardrails so you don't like drive right off the cliff, because sometimes you end up hyperfocusing on something at the detriment of everything else in your life. So if you get really excited about a project and you're working on it, but then like you miss showing up for a recording for your podcast, like Danny's probably not going to be super happy about that. And you could be like, but look what I accomplished. Cool. You also didn't show up on time. You made me look bad. Right. So like, you want to install some guardrails. Like, you want to have some time where you can slip into hyperfocus and really be able to engage in these projects in a really deep way without missing anything important. And then you can also do things like set timers, or have somebody come and check on you at a certain time. If you really have trouble with hyperfocus, somebody suggested like setting a lamp timer on your, like, if you're, I don't know, playing a video game or you're on your computer or whatever, plug it into a lamp timer and it automatically turns off at a certain time. So you can't go past that time. Like, if you have a hard time paying attention to alarms and stuff to snap you out of it. So there's a lot of different strategies, but I love my hyperfocus. I love that my brain can do that, but I have to be careful, because otherwise I will hyperfocus right through meals, right through events, right through, things that other people are expecting me to do. So it really is this double-edged sword. You want to be able to lean into it, but you also want to make sure that you're not cutting anybody or yourself in the process.
I might need to get my husband tested for some ADHD, because that sounds very familiar. That sounds very familiar. That just gave me so much perspective. Like, I need to be a little gentler with him with that, because I do not understand. I'm just like, why can't you just stop now? Like, just stop and like do the other thing. But he's like one of those people, like, we're walking out the door and he's an entrepreneur. So, he's like, he's very like into what he's doing all the time. And he will literally like be like, I'm coming. And then it's like 30 minutes later, we're all just like sitting by the door, like, okay. And he'll be like, it's just going to take me 5 minutes. But then he gets like, it's like what you said, like he just gets like taken away. It's like a current, and he just gets taken out to sleep.
That's a
And
great way of putting it. Yeah, it's
yeah,
like a
and
current. You get swept up. And
yeah,
there's even a term for it, like in the positive, where you're riding the wave. Like you get swept up in something. You
you
want to be able
don't,
to ride the wave and like do something when you're in the mood to do it, because otherwise it can be really hard for us to focus on it and get it done if we're
yep.
not in the mood. So when we're in the mood to do it, it's like, let's do it. But also time management is an issue with ADHD. I have a whole chapter about how to see time, because we tend to be time blind or time nearsighted. So he probably thought it was 5 minutes.
That I've had to learn that. I was just like, oh no. Well, he'll say like, oh, it's gonna take me 30 minutes. In my mind, I'm like, this is gonna take 2 hours. Let me plan for that. Because it used to frustrate me
Yeah.
because I'm like, you said 30 minutes, it wasn't 30 minutes, it's been 2 hours. What's going on? And it's easy to kind of feel like that person is inconsiderate. It's
Yep.
easy to feel like that person just isn't prioritizing you and your time. So it's nice to talk about this and like understand how another brain and another person really functions so that you don't take it so personally. Because that's in a
Mhm.
relationship with someone and you're not like that, so you can't relate. It's very easy to feel offended by their behaviors because you feel like it's just a lack of prioritizing and caring about your partner. So that's really good to know. I'm happy that you just said that because that's like,
Yeah.
oh, I get that.
Yeah, if you haven't already, check out chapter 12. It's called How to Heart, and I talk about that. I talk about how like it can look like we don't care.
Mhm.
And like the first anecdote is like, why can't you just, like, oh, why can't you just and if you cared about me, you'd, right? Like if you actually
Right.
cared about this, all of those things, that's really, really natural to happen in relationships where one person's neurotypical and one person has ADHD. Or in my case, I have ADHD, but it's pretty well managed, and my partner is ADHD. He's autistic and ADHD, and was more recently diagnosed, hadn't had it under control yet. And so like I was feeling like I was the more neurotypical partner, and I was frustrated with his challenges. And it was just really
Mm.
weird to be on both sides, because I'm like, I know better. Like, why can't you just, oh my God, I have to catch myself, because I know why you can't just, because
Yeah.
I can't just. Like there are a lot of
Yeah.
things I can't just do, right? But it's
Yes.
still, that pattern is so, so pervasive. And like
Yeah.
everything you said, I think is a lot of people are going to relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, so I used to say, actually, I still kind of say I have time depth perception in that I don't truly understand how long things take. If I know I have an hour in my mind, and Danny and I were literally talking about it yesterday, in my mind, if I have an hour, I can take a 10-minute nap. I can take a shower in 5 minutes. I can get dressed in the other 5 minutes. I can go cook a meal in 20 minutes. And I can be at the destination on time
And I'm just like, what? She's like,
in
I'm gonna go do this, this, and this, and I'll be at our meeting by 2. And I'm just like, but the drive alone is 30 minutes. Like, how is that not factored into the other 5 things that take at least 30 minutes to do?
I
Like,
really don't mean to.
I still have to check that in myself. Like I got out of it, the interview before this, I got out like 20 minutes early, and I realized, oh shoot, I overplanned my day. Write it, in half an hour. Like when we're done, I'm supposed to start a shoot, and I forgot to get the props for that shoot. And I was like, I got 20 minutes. I have time to go home and get the props and come back. And then like I had to sit there and go, hang on, like if it's a 10-minute drive to get to my house, how long is it going to take me to get down the stairs, to get into the car, to get my dog? Like my dog might have to go
yeah.
potty. I might take a minute to find, like I had to manually go, no, that's not going to work. Like you're going to be late. And even then I wasn't sure. I was like, maybe I have time, but I've learned not to assume that, because I'm like, I will straight up be late. I'll be like, I totally have time. That is one of the lies that our brains tell us. Like I have time,
It's a big
because like
lie.
we forget about things. We forget about transition time. We forget about
Yeah.
things going wrong. We forget
Mhm.
we forget to account for a lot of things. And then on
Yeah.
top of that, we might actually think that a shower takes us 5 minutes, when maybe actually it takes 13 minutes. And we don't know that because it feels like it takes 5 minutes, right? Because of the time blindness. But I imagine it's incredibly frustrating if you do have a good sense of
Oh,
time to watch somebody plan their time like this, because it's like, what, like it's so obvious to you, right? But to us,
yeah.
it's not. It's just
It
not
is
how our
not.
brains work.
It's
I'm like
not.
that.
I drive my people crazy. I literally had to route through Russia to get back to America, coming from Africa, while being in London because of my time blindness. I know.
I need to hear this story. What?
I really don't mean to. In my mind, I had more than enough time. So we flew from Africa to London. We were in London We had 2 hours. I sent my daughter and my sister ahead of me to go and get on the plane while I finished this one last thing. I didn't realize I didn't have enough time to finish the one last thing in the airport. Then I wasn't paying attention. I got on the train going in the opposite direction for one of the airports. Then they had to take me through the back end of the airport to get me to my gate. But by the time I got to the gate, the pilot said he couldn't wait. Mind you, we were on the phone with the pilot.
Oh my God.
It's bad. I couldn't make
Wow.
the flight. So my daughter is crying. My sister is like, yo, you really got to get yourself together. I am not trying to. I have missed flights for major events where I'm supposed to do press conferences. It is a real challenge for me. A real
It is a
challenge.
challenge. And you just spoke to another one of the things, the one more thing itis that we didn't. Oh, just one more thing. Oh, I've got time. I got time. Like I've got 5 minutes. Oh, I can do one more thing, right? Like not realizing that 5 minutes is going to turn into 10 minutes, and now you're late. Like there's so many times, and people are like, well, why don't you just leave early? And I'm like, I try, but then I'm like, but now I have time, so now I'm stopping at Starbucks, and now I'm 20 minutes later than I would have been if I'd left at the regular time. Like it's such a battle. It is so hard, and people don't understand. But Dr. Russell Barkley is a huge prominent ADHD researcher, neuroscientist, and he did a study and found that 98% of people with ADHD self-report having time management difficulties. 98%. 98% of people don't self-report liking ice cream. That is a huge, huge number. And it's compared to 8% of the general population. So that's a huge, huge difference. So like, well, yeah, everyone needs to work on time management and, have a calendar and all these things, but people with ADHD are struggling so much harder. We're out here struggling so much harder with time. And it's really hard for people who don't have those struggles to understand because it's not their experience.
Yeah, and I can imagine that because earlier you spoke about it being something that is polygenetic, and your aunt, when she took her son, like she was diagnosed, it was like, oh, okay, like I can understand a bit. So I'm assuming that it's really challenging for the parents of children and teenagers who are struggling with ADHD. And how do you feel like, especially now with there being more information, right? Like I'm sure like in the 70s and 80s, people are like, what the hell is that? Like who, like what? Just focus, okay? Or here are some pills, or like there's been all these other, I would like to say maybe more dismissive approaches to it. How do you feel like parents now, if they're wanting to better support their children, their teenagers, in this, how can they show up and support them in a better way that may actually produce results, as opposed to just maybe trying to numb them or have them, what you kind of said, like trying to have them like divert back into the other way and give them other ways to do things that just don't work for them?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is learning about it, hands down. Like we know that psychoeducation is really, really helpful for patients and for their families, because
Okay.
if you're working with a brain that you do not understand, then the strategies you're going to use aren't going to make sense, right? Like if you look at somebody with ADHD, if you look at a kid with ADHD and you see a behavioral issue, you're going to try discipline. And guess what? That's not going to work. It's not going to work because you cannot punish away a disability. What that kid needs is support. What that kid needs is structure. What that kid needs is different kinds of parenting, because you're working with a different type of child. You're working with a different neurodevelopmental timeline. So your kid's peers might be able to clean their room on their own. Your kid might be a few years delayed in terms of executive function. And so they still need a list, or they still need you sitting there and walking them through what to do. And if you expect a child to do things that they are not ready for cognitively, it creates a lot of anxiety. It creates a lot of shame. It creates a lot of frustration. And it is going to look like they're being, defiant on purpose, when maybe they just don't understand what is being asked from them, or their brains can't handle what is being asked of them. And so a lot of it is you have to have differences in how you parent, because you're dealing with a different neurotype. So one of the big things is behavioral therapy. So at first, when kids are young, behavioral therapy means parents go and learn from a therapist how to parent a neurodivergent child, because it is different. You can also get accommodations. So if a kid's more severe, that you can get an IEP, or if their ADHD is more mild, like maybe you just need a 504 plan, but you can get accommodations for your child, like a reduced homework load. So if you're fighting with your kid every night over homework, then you can actually reduce the amount of homework they have to do every night, because we know from research homework is not actually as effective as we think. And if kids don't get enough sleep, they're not going to be able to learn. So
Yeah.
if their homework is like a battle every night and it's keeping you both up until midnight, and then the kid's not getting enough sleep, they're not going to be very effective at school the next day. So you can reduce the amount of homework they get. You can extend the amount of time they get on tests. There are a lot of different accommodations that you can get for your child to make school a little bit more compatible with how their brain naturally works. And then medication is an option, and it's a really effective option for a lot of people. Medication worked really, really well for me. Pills don't teach skills. It is not enough to give a child
Right.
medication, but it can be a very powerful tool in the toolbox, and it can make it easier to use and implement other strategies if the underlying neurotransmitter differences are addressed. The way that my psychiatrist explained it to me is like, if you're low on B6, you would take a B6 supplement. Cool. Your brain's low on dopamine and norepinephrine. Let's fix that, right? Like, let's give you medication to kind of balance out your brain neurotransmitters a little bit so that you can choose what to focus on. I still need skills. I still need other strategies and tools, but medication is one of the most powerful tools out there for ADHD.
Yeah, and I like the other things too, like you saying that it sounds like you're saying a combination of the things is necessary, because it like you said, the pills don't teach the skills, so it's not just like giving your children pills and hoping that they act right or hoping that they
Right.
just snap out of it or something. It's also working with them, and I mean that's just children who don't even have ADHD.
Yeah.
That's just like a part of raising children. It's figuring out how their brains work, right?
Yeah.
And figuring out, like, my husband has a son from his previous marriage, and he doesn't really do well with instruction unless it's very specific. So, like, if my husband says, go grab my phone, you cannot just tell him, go grab my phone. You have to say, go grab my phone. It's sitting on the couch, it's on the charger on the right hand side. Like, you can't, and it's just like, it made me think of that because it's one of those things where, like, it feels a little bit like extra work. Like, why don't you just know to just go look in the
Mhm.
area that my phone
Yeah.
usually is and go get it from there? And I tell him, I'm like, I think his brain works a little differently. So let's try to find ways that we can communicate with him that alleviates his frustration and ours. So I
Yeah.
would definitely second that notion for parents, like, figuring out how you can kind of support them in how you treat them and how you entreat them and how you kind of respond to them, I think would make such a difference so that they don't feel so out of place or so weird or so awkward or like something's wrong with them. I'm sure that
Yeah.
would help a lot for children, because I know that culturally, like, we're just told to like snap out of it, and or you need a good ass whooping, like, honestly, like.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pull yourself
Yeah,
together.
I hear from that. I hear from that from certain communities, or like pray it away, or
Yeah.
like it's just a
That's
discipline
us
thing, like
too.
they just need a
Yep.
spanking, right? Yeah. So
Pray.
it's
Pray real hard.
yeah.
It'll be all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And religion can offer a lot of supports, but like it's not always the right solution. And in this case, it's not a moral issue, right? And it's not
No.
something you can pray away. So
It has nothing to do with morality.
yeah.
I recognize, so my daughter actually too has ADHD. And so for her, I had to take her out of the classroom. She still has a 504 plan, so she needs extra time to take tests. She has really bad test anxiety. If there are other people in the room with her, she wants to have a conversation while she's also supposed to be
Yeah.
doing the test. And so it would take her out of the, when we had her in private school, they would take her out of the general classroom for her to take her test. They would have to give her double the time of what it would take. And there were just, a number of accommodations that she would have to have. And then when the pandemic hit, I was like, oh, this is not going to work at all.
Oh wow.
So
Yeah.
I had to start homeschooling her because she had gotten behind by 2 years. It was just that bad. In the 1 year, like, it was rough for us. And so I homeschooled her, and I got her a certified teacher who understood. Now, I knew I couldn't do it because with the way my ADHD is set up, that wasn't going to work out for the two of us. So I hired someone who I knew would be able to help me to help her. in the 2 years that we've now been with this teacher, she's in the 8th grade and now reads and comprehends and writes on 12th grade level in English. And then for math, where she was 2 years behind, she's now right on target because, and I kept telling, because one of my family members, they're like, well, why are you doing that? It doesn't take all that. And I'm like, for you and maybe your child, it doesn't take all that. My child is different. I understand she's different. It doesn't mean she's bad or she's slow or whatever it is. She's different. And so I have to honor that fact, or else we're going to be in here boxing because I'm so frustrated and she's so angry that I'm so frustrated. Why not just do what I need to do for her? And so in honoring that, I would love for, what do you believe are maybe the top 3 or just maybe top tools that folks can use to better manage? And I know there are 3 of them where it's, inattention, hyperactivity, and also impulsivity. That might be a lot. So even if it's just one, but maybe so inattention, since that's the one that's most prevalent that you were saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but what are maybe 3 tools that we can use to better manage it?
Well, first of all, I just want to point out that story made me cry because like that is it. That is how to do it. Like you were honoring your needs, her needs, your unique situation. You were able to advocate for her, get her the support that she needed in a way that also worked for you. And you were able to say to family, this might not be what you needed, it's what we needed. And it was right, what was right for us. And like that makes me cry because that is such a far cry from like how things were even a decade ago. Like it is, and there's a lot of families that is still not the way that things work, but it's just such a beautiful example of how to do it. And the outcome that you are seeing is because you did that, because you advocated, because you went, yeah, maybe this isn't the normal way of doing it. Maybe the normal way of doing it is that I would homeschool her myself or leave her in school, but like, that's not what we needed. No. And you had an outside the box, like a creative solution. You brought this other person in. Like, it's just, that was such a beautiful story. And I just want to honor that because it made me cry because that was beautiful. It was just so well done. And you should feel so proud of yourself. Like, and you're such a good mom for recognizing and honoring both of your limitations and both of your challenges and being able to like, just do that for your daughter. It's just beautiful. Thank you. I'm sort of emotional. Like I'm 30 weeks pregnant right now myself. So like I'm about to have a kid.
Congratulations.
Listen, you were just giving us all the good news today. Yes.
There's a lot of good news. So like I'm excited to have a child, but I'm nervous too because I have ADHD, and like if my child also has ADHD and has unique challenges that I need to support, I'm like, I barely just figured out how to do this for myself. Like I hope that I can be that kind of parent to my child, and it's really just inspiring. To hear you
will be, especially because you understand it on a different level. You're like more than prepared. You're going to be so surprised. I'm so excited for you. That's great.
Thanks.
And even when you mess it up, because you will, please don't think you're ever going to be perfect because it does not exist. So don't try and be the perfect parent. Just be an intentional one. So when you notice like, okay, you are getting irritated or frustrated or this isn't working, give yourself the space. Danny says it all the time. I have now adopted it. Danny, you can go ahead and say it because it's your quote. What do you tell Izzy all the time?
Breathe so you can think.
Ooh, I like that. And there's another one that I've heard, because calm down can be actually triggering. Triggering out, right? Yeah. Like calm down. It like, has that ever worked on anybody ever?
No.
Like
nobody.
Right. But slow down is one that I heard. Dr. Sharon Saline is really good with ADHD and anxiety, and she taught me that one. She's like, slow down. And it's that breathe so you can think. It's that same thing. Like our brains are racing and our bodies are it's that fight, flight, freeze, reaction. And so you can't think straight when you're in that space. But if you can slow yourself down, if you can slow down your breath, if you can slow down your movements, then your brain starts to calm down a little bit without anybody having to tell you to calm down. Which is, I really like that strategy. Like in terms of tackling impulsivity, that slow down, because we go so quickly and our emotional impulsivity is really fast, and our brains move really quickly. So working on slowing ourselves down and building up our brakes is a really important one. In terms of focus, again, the number one strategy that works for focus for most people with ADHD is medication. It is like night and day. It is like putting on glasses, and it can be hard for some people because it's like, well, did I do this thing or did my medication do it? Like, is this actually me? But I try to think of it. There was this way that somebody explained it to me once that I thought was really good. If I wear contacts or glasses and I read a book, was it me that read the book or was it my glasses? Well, obviously, like, I'm the one who read the book. It
Yeah.
was it would have been a lot harder without my glasses.
Yeah.
The glasses made it easier. It made it more doable, but I'm still the one who sat down and read the book. And so our accomplishments are our accomplishments, whether or not we used medication to support us in achieving them. But medication can make a huge difference in focus. Another one that I really, really like is, let me flip to that chapter because I have a whole chapter on how to hyperfocus.
Yes, we have the New York Times best-selling author, the U.S. Weekly Journal. I love this.
This is a good one. A lot of ADHD strategies come down to boosting the signal and decreasing the noise. So the signal of what we're supposed to do can really easily get lost in the noise of everything else. So what can help is both to strengthen the signal of what it is we're trying to focus on and decrease the noise around it. So that means things like turning off your notifications, turning off your phone if you're trying to work. That's all decreasing the noise, right? Wearing headphones can be helpful for a lot of people, especially if they're working in a noisy environment, like literally decreasing the noise.
I have to do that. You are
Mhm.
just speaking my whole, like, I feel so seen.
Yep. Or if sometimes the noise is internal, like there's a lot of chatter in your brain. So like meditating or getting those thoughts out on paper. If your brain keeps trying to remind you of things to do, like get it on a to-do list, get it out of your head so that you're decreasing the internal noise. And then boosting the signal is things like having that to-do list in front of your face of what you're supposed to be working on, or like a super low-tech, cheap way to do it is have 2 Post-it notes that you put on your computer, and one says doing and the other says not doing. And so like when you're like, oh, but I need to be working on this. Cool. I'm not doing that right now. I'm going to write that on that Post-it. Here's what I'm doing. Here's the task that I'm working on right now. And then practice practice non-judgmental redirection. So if you find yourself off task, because that's going to happen, because our brains, like there's a stimuli, we respond even before we really have a chance to think about a lot of the time. So like I hear a noise and I'm out the door before I even think about like the fact that I'm in an interview right now. That can happen. So redirect yourself. Be like, oh, cool, I'm off task again. What was I doing? Let me get back to it, without beating yourself up, because that's the key, right? Like so often we're like, oh, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just, why can't I? The same things that other people think about us, like we think of those things about ourselves too. Like, why can't I just stay focused? Why can't I just stay in my seat or whatever? It's just like, oh, cool. Like I'm out the door again. Like, or, oh, cool. Like I just started on another project that isn't what I intended to be working on. All right, moving back. And meditation and mindfulness can help a lot with practicing that, building up those skills. A lot of people think that meditation is about quieting your mind. And so a lot of people with ADHD think that they can't meditate because there's so much chatter. It's not about quieting your mind. It's about learning not to immediately respond to whatever thought pops into your head. So you're not doing meditation wrong if you like thoughts pop up about like this vacation you want to take to Hawaii. If you start planning the vacation to Hawaii and you start Googling stuff, well, now you're not meditating anymore. But like you're practicing something called distractibility delay, which means if you get distracted, most people with ADHD will immediately act on that, right? But with meditation, with mindfulness, with non-judgmental redirection, you're essentially trying to build in a little space between having a thought and acting on that thought, so that when you need that, you know, in certain situations, like that muscle is essentially built up a little bit more.
Something that I've learned from working with somebody who has ADHD, and to not like, she says that I do a really good job of holding space for her, but I don't think she understands how intentional I am with that, because I do get annoyed and frustrated, but I'm like, it's very important to me to know people that I'm close to. It's like, it's not enough for me to just like have history with you and time spent with you and time elapsed with you, but like I really want to get to know you and know who you are. So I've been friends with Alicia now for 15 years. So I understand a bit how she operates. So one of the things that I do to her, and I don't think she's going to know that I do it, but one of the things that I do to her, because she does go really fast and I realize that her brain goes really fast, is I ask her a lot of clarifying questions, even if like I know the answer. it's how I help her to like slow down without telling her to slow down, because I don't want her, so it's like this thing that I do to her to like help her like reel it in, because she can like just go off on a tangent, or she's explaining something and she's talking like 50 miles a minute and you're like, what? you know so like I will ask a lot of clarifying questions, not to like antagonize her, but just to like help her better explain herself, because she speaks as if you're in her head.
Mm.
And it's very difficult sometimes to follow, because she thinks that because it's in her head, how she's saying it is what I should understand. And I'm like, that sounds like you. Like, she will literally have conversations with me in her head. And then she'll be like, oh, I thought I told you. And I'm like, we never spoke about that. She's like, yeah, we did. She's like, yeah, I talked to you about it 3 days ago. I told you everything. I'm like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. And I remember it used to frustrate me, because I'd be like, girl, like your communication is piss poor. Like, what is happening? You did not have that conversation with me. And she'll make entire decisions. She'll do all the things with this idea that she spoke to me. And I'm like, girl, you are Delulu. You did not have that conversation with me. So I've had to learn how to like ask the right questions, follow up with her, get clarifying information from her so that we can work together well, because otherwise we are going to go off a cliff. Okay.
Yeah. I'm curious how that works for you, Alicia, and how it lands for you, knowing that that's what's happening. Does that feel supportive?
So I didn't know it, but now absolutely, because it's something that people have been telling me for years. They're like, hey, I'm not understanding what you're saying. Because in my mind, I have created from the beginning to the end, and you just got to get on board because I've got this. Come on. We're good. Let's all go. And I'll say it, and I'm just expecting them to be like, oh, yeah, no, we totally get that. And so it's funny that she says she'll ask clarifying questions, but because people have at this point consistently told me, like, yo, I'm not, come bring me into your world because I'm not getting it. I've now been trying to, hey, so can you explain to me what I just said? Do you understand? Are you following me? Sometimes I will say, now that I'm realizing it, I'll get irritated with her in my spirit. Like, girl, why are you asking me? What is wrong? And it's like, that's what she's doing, because I am overwhelming her with my little hyperactivity and she's not understanding. So she's trying to slow me down so that she can come to an understanding, and also I can become a better communicator at explaining it. So I actually like that. That makes me feel good, and I won't get irritated
And so that you're not constantly repeating yourself. Because I find that frustrating when I have to repeat myself. So I try to I want us in the same conversation to get the understanding, as opposed to us having to have the same conversations over and over again.
I love this working together, because that's essentially what it is. Like, so far, a lot of the history of ADHD has been like, let's get them to be more neurotypical, and so the entire burden of change is on the person who's already struggling, and that's really, really hard, right? So like the way that I explain it in physical terms is like, it's not like if we had a physical disability, it's like we not only have to provide our own wheelchairs, which fine, but we also have to build all our own ramps, right? When we're not the only ones who need them. So it's really nice to see you interfacing together and going, okay, we have different communication styles. How can I adjust my communication to meet her where she's at with her communication? And it's going to be frustrating a little bit for both of you, but it's frustrating for both of you instead of it just piling all on one person. And in the end, like, you're able to communicate, which, by the way, what you're talking about probably is divergent thinking, which is really common with ADHD. It's very outside the box, non-linear thinking is what happens.
She got that. Whatever that is, that's what she got.
Yeah. And it's wonderful, and it's what contributes to ADHD creativity. But it also means that when we have conversations, sometimes like neurotypical people will go A to B to C to D, and it's easy to follow their points. But people with ADHD will go like A to D to F to purple, like just all over the place, right? And it makes sense to us.
Yeah.
It's very always speaking very as a matter of factly, by the way. Like, she's always speaking as if like, duh. And it's like, nah, bitch, I don't know what you're saying. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, the same way that time makes sense to you, this nonlinear style of thinking makes sense to her, right? And it's different brains traits,
Yeah,
different growth
which I've
strengths.
observed over the years because I'm again very intentional on getting to know my loved ones, and I'm just like, okay, her brain doesn't work like mine. I need to figure out a way that we can communicate effectively because I cannot stand talking in circles. Like that drives me nuts. So I
Mhm.
have to like, we find our different ways to work with each other so that we can, have a healthy communication so we can get shit done. Because otherwise we won't get anything done. And
Yeah.
sometimes people don't realize it's not and I think just about every therapist says this now, and we usually use it in terms of romantic relationships, but in any relationship, it's not you against the person, it's you and that person against whatever the thing is, right, that you're
Yes,
trying to
yes,
overcome. So
yeah.
I always, try to keep that in mind no matter how frustrated I am. It's like, okay, but we have a goal that we have to get to together, so we both have to adjust and do whatever it takes to get there, rather than fight each other because somebody wants to prove a point.
I love this. It's so healthy. Oh my god, you two are such good role models for this stuff. And like the fact that you were willing to tell her like, "Hey, this is what I do," is also really great because sometimes people will do things for us and like they'll do so much for us that we're not even aware of that like
Mhm.
it's kind of disempowering for us because we don't know what the strategy is and
Yeah.
we're kind of being treated like a child sometimes. And for the other person, they can get resentful because they're doing all this work that's going unappreciated. And so
Mm.
having
Yeah.
that conversation and going, okay, what's the plan? Like we want to communicate better. Is this helpful? Cool. Yeah. All right, cool. Now that I know that that's what you're doing, I'm going to be grateful for it instead of frustrated that you're talking to me like that, right? Like it's good to have those
Yeah.
conversations and get on the same page because then you can be partners instead of parenting each other.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, Jessica, listen, this is literally, I just have felt so seen. I have enjoyed this conversation so much. And don't worry, we have two more questions. But I just wanted to just acknowledge and say that, like, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. But I wanted to know, just like you said, how it makes me feel like, oh, so I won't get frustrated anymore because I know what she's doing. And this helps us both to communicate. How do you work through those mental blocks of feeling like you're not enough, or why can't you just figure this out because of your challenges? Because I've literally sat in airports after I've missed another flight trying my best to figure out, why can't you just get this together? What is wrong with you and why can't you figure yourself out? So what are some of the like mental things that we can work through?
I mean, for me, it was a long journey. It took me 7 years, 8 years to get to the point that I'm at now from this internalized ableism, this idea that like I'm not enough or I'm wrong or broken or whatever, and not really understanding how my brain works and feeling disempowered, to slowly learning how my brain worked, what my challenges were, what my, what tools I could use and stuff like that. And while I didn't ever overcome my ADHD. Like I got to the end of the journey and I expected, I don't know, to like not have ADHD anymore. Like I thought I could keep the good parts about it that I like, but like lose all the struggles. That did not happen. If anybody could have overcome their
Mm.
ADHD, it would have been me. I had the time, I had the resources, I literally made it my career. Did not happen. Was very disappointing. However, what did happen is I was able to close this gap between the person that I was and the person I thought I was supposed to be. And part of how I closed
Mm.
that gap was by adjusting my understanding of who I am to something closer to the person I already am, right? Like, who am I supposed to be? Actually, I am supposed to be somebody with ADHD. Turns out I am not going to be neurotypical no matter what I do. But I also learned all the strategies and supports to put in place to help me be more effective and empower me. So now what I want to achieve and what I expect of myself is achievable. Whereas before it wasn't. It was like there was this huge chasm between like my potential and my reality, right? Like my potential and then my reality. And now I understand it's not a set point. Potential is not a set point for people with ADHD. It is a range. There are going to be days where you're going to get me at my absolute best and I'm going to crush it. And then there are days where I'm going to forget how to word. Like, and you know what? Like, that's all part of my potential. Like, it's a range. It's not going to be, you're always going to get me on point at this level. Sometimes I'm going to do amazingly well, like better than you could have expected. And sometimes I'm going to struggle to the point where like, I, I, I was trying to record something one day, like a promo for something, and I kept messing up so many times that I was like, oh my God, somebody fire me. Like I am so bad at my job. Right. And then there's other times where I'm like, I'm a New York Times bestselling author. What? That's amazing. Right. But like, it's not going to be a consistent thing. And that was one of the things that I had to learn. So the more that I learned about my ADHD and the more that I connected with other people who had it, the more normalized these struggles became, and the better I understood myself and knew what to expect of myself and what was reasonable and what was just not. Right? There's just certain things that my brain is never going to do. I am never going to be able to keep my house clean on my own. I had to accept that. I need a housekeeper if I'm going to have a clean house, or I'm going to live in a messy house. Like, those are my options. And I feel like I should be able to. This is not that hard. I am smart. I am capable. I am determined. Like, I have the time to clean my house. Like, what is wrong with me that I can't keep my house clean? But looking back, over the course of my entire life, have I ever historically been able to keep my house clean on my own? No. No, not unless I made it my full-time job, right? Like, and even then it was really frustrating and difficult. And so I go, you know what? That's not where my strengths lie. My strengths lie in writing a best-selling book so that I can make enough money to pay for a housekeeper. And you know what? I'm going to be real grateful for their talents and their strengths, and the fact that they can do that, because to me, it's freaking magic. The fact that somebody can come into like my chaotic mess in the morning, and by like the afternoon, it's all like I have no idea how that happens. Like, there might as well be pixies coming in and like setting up a magical forest in my house. I don't understand it. I don't understand this magic. It is not my strength, and that's okay. And so that was really helpful for me to just accept the places where no matter how many strategies I use, I'm not going to do well, and then understand where I can lean into my strengths. And then what's in between, what's going to be hard for me, like writing a book, but still plays to enough of my strengths that I'm going to be able to do a good job with it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that piece about the in between. We always hear about like strengths and weaknesses, or strengths and challenges, but never about the spaces in between where you have to like work through something to make it a strength, or lean on another part of yourself to amplify this other part of yourself. Like, that's a real journey to try to figure that out. And I know we've spoken a bit throughout the conversation about the misconceptions that surround ADHD, but in summary, what would you say are maybe some of the most common misconceptions about people with ADHD? And then how should we learn to reframe that so that we can all communicate and understand each other better?
One of them is just that it's not that big a deal. Like, ADHD is a joke in our society. There's this idea that like, oh, you're just, this is something that everybody struggles with, right? Like, oh, everybody's a little ADHD, or it's just squirrel, right? Like, we don't take ADHD
Oh my
seriously as a
God, I say
society.
that to my husband all the time, making fun of it.
Right. And there's nothing.
I'm just like, okay, squirrel.
Yeah. And we make light of it ourselves too. Like, people with ADHD will make jokes about it, and that's fine, as long as overall we're taking it seriously, because we know that there are significant impacts on quality of life, on divorce rates, on job loss, on accident rates, on Dr. Barkley found that on average it shaves off 12.7 years of your life on average to have ADHD. Like, these are not jokes. This is not it's not a small thing. It impacts and impairs your life in multiple ways, different aspects of your life. And as long as we're pretending that it's just a joke, or that it's just a superpower, like, we're not going to acknowledge the ways in which we actually need supports.
That's so true. It's not a joke or a superpower. That's really powerful. That's a very good like, that's perspective.
Not that we can't have strengths. I think that we have really unique strengths, and part of those are because of how our brain works differently. But it is not in and of itself a superpower. It would not be diagnosed unless it was distressing, unless it was impairing, unless it was dysfunctional in some way. Like, if we weren't struggling, we would not have been diagnosed with this. And so honoring those struggles and recognizing that invisible does not mean imaginary. We're not making this stuff up. We are struggling, and there's a reason that we're struggling, and taking that seriously, I think, is really important, because if you don't, then you can't advocate for yourself, and you're not going to use the strategies that you need. You're not going to spend the money that you need to spend on the tools that you need if you don't think you should need them. So recognizing that it is serious and it is worth accommodating, it is worth advocating for, I think, is really important.
Thank you. Like, you have literally just gotten my whole life together. I feel like I owe you a check. Send me an invoice for your bill, because this has been such a phenomenal conversation. And as we close out, I really want to make sure that we do this quick fun segment, because we talk about some deep, deep things. So before you leave, if you had to choose this or that, which one would you choose if you had to choose home office or co-working space?
Ooh, both.
Nope, this is
I
that.
know it's a cop out, but like having both choices is really helpful for me. Like one of the best things I think for ADHD is to have options so that you can use what your brain needs that day. So there are times where
Ooh.
like my anxiety is really bad and I need to be cozy at home wrapped in blankets and I need to do my own thing. And then there's sometimes where like I need the accountability. Like my brain is not going to focus if I don't have other people around me. So I need to be in a co-working space. Having that choice to me so that I can do what makes sense for my brain on that day is really important.
Okay. So working with music or working in silence?
It depends. I tend to work in silence as a default, but when I first started writing, like at a certain point in the process, I would put on the same music every time. And so it's kind of a go to now if I'm struggling to write to play that one piece of music. And it's instrumental. Lyrics will get in the way of me writing because the words interfere with the words in my head. But if I put on some instrumental music, and I write, I can almost every time get into a flow, and it's a little bit of a hack. To
Ooh.
I have this association with this music means writing, so if that music is playing, I'm writing.
Ooh.
Oh, okay. So then morning person or night owl?
I used to be more of a night owl, but during pregnancy, fun fact, your circadian rhythm shifts quite dramatically. And so right now I'm waking up at 6 in the morning going, what? Who am I? I don't know what's going on. It's great. But like, even when I was more of a night owl, I still liked the morning for self-care because whatever happens during the day, it honestly exhausts me, overwhelms me. Like I get distracted. I end up in hyper focus, whatever. So like I have a rule that whatever I'm going to do to take care of myself, that's happening in the morning before I go to work. So like I eat a vegetable, I drink a glass of water, I do prenatal yoga. If I'm going to meditate, that's when I'm going to meditate because then the rest of the day I know is going to pull me in a bunch of different directions and I'm not going to make it back to self-care. So even when I was a night owl, it was still like that, whatever my morning was, it might be like 10 a.m. to noon, but whatever my morning was, that was sacred. That was like, okay, let me take care of me so that I don't die.
When you have a child, please try to honor that time still.
It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be a really interesting challenge because I imagine that the self-care turns to childcare, where like the first thing you wake up, you want to take care of your kid, right?
Yep.
Right. So you can still do that, but instead of 10 to 12, you may have 10 a.m. to 10:15 a.m. Right?
Just
So
15 minutes. Drink a glass of water. Eat a broccoli. Just go.
yeah, like it still matters so much. And I
Yeah.
feel like one of the not mistakes, but one of the things that we neglect a lot as mothers, especially new mothers, because I just had another baby. I have a 13-week-old baby.
Oh my God! Congratulations.
Thank you. So it's my second baby girl. And that part is still like I just haven't figured that out 100%. So I just always encourage people, like, if you could just take 5 minutes, like my one thing for myself, and I tell every mother this: shower, whatever your showering schedule is, don't change that. So I shower every
Mm,
day, no matter what is happening, no matter how many babies are crying, no matter what's going on, I'm going to shower today. That is like my thing, So, like, whatever your thing is that you do every day, even if it's 5 minutes, just take that little time for yourself.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're
Thank you.
welcome. It's really important. Okay, so the last couple are music or reading. Like listening to music only, just jamming out, or reading a good book.
That's tough. Reading with the caveat that
Ooh.
there's a lot of books that are not very ADHD friendly where like there's long blocks of text and my brain just nopes out. So as I've gotten older and the text has gotten smaller and smaller and less white space and no pictures, like it's gotten harder for me to sit down and read and to take the time to do that. But I'm realizing it doesn't have to be that way. So my book is written in a way that's ADHD friendly. There's lots of white
Oh,
space, there's bullet points, there's pull quotes, there's a lot to break up the page so it's easier to read. When there's a book that I can read, I love curling up with a good book.
okay. And last one is adventurous vacation, doing all the things, or relaxing spa vacation, just kicking back.
Hmm. I hmm. Okay, that's hard because like the doing all the things, I'd get overwhelmed and I would get home and I'd be more exhausted than when I left for vacation. So that wouldn't work for me. But relaxing spa vacation, I've noticed like I get bored in like 5 minutes. So this is another one where I'm gonna say kind of both. Like I like going on a vacation where I have one exciting thing planned for the day, and the rest of the day I can just chill and do whatever I want. So there's, I get back and I'm like, oh man, like that was a really exciting vacation, but also I had a lot of time to chill. So that's another one where I'm like, both, man, do people always pick one or the other? I can't do that.
No, everyone doesn't.
I gotta
We
feel
have
it to me.
Both. Yeah.
Yeah, there are quite a few people who definitely have done both. But again, we thank you so much for your time. Where can we stay connected? Where can we also get your New York Times best-selling book?
My website is my website is howtoadhd.com. I'm at howtoadhd across all the platforms. And if you want to get the book, howtoadhdbook.com has easy links to different retailers to get the book. It is currently available anywhere books are sold. So yeah.
Awesome. You can stay connected with me everywhere, all over at Alicia Reese. Y'all know my mother got excited. It's ALECHIAREESE. And Danny, where can we stay connected with you?
You can stay connected with me at the Danny Bordeaux. Bordeaux is BOURDEAU. You can stay connected with us at triggeredafpodcast.com. You can stay connected with us on Instagram at triggeredafpc. And don't forget to go to triggeredafevents.com so you can stay up to date with all the latest and greatest things that we have coming to a city near you.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much, Jessica. Oh, this conversation for me was just world altering. So I thank you so much for your time, for your energy, and for sharing space with us. So until next time, bye.
Bye. Thank you so much. This was incredible.